Hey guys, this is Eckhartsladder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Squadrons video. And you know what? It's actually been a little while since I've said that. We started our really hardcore coverage of Star Wars Squadrons actually about a month ago from today. As many of you know, I was lucky enough to try out Star Wars Squadrons, so I've been sharing with you guys as much information as I possibly can. Now, I do feel like I've covered a lot of what I wanted to share, but if there are more questions or topics that you'd like me to discuss in future videos, of course, leave that down below. Now, I do think we'll have some Star Wars Squadrons news coming sooner rather than later, so if you're interested in Squadrons, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and of course, when the game drops, we will be streaming it and making videos on it all the time. And of course, if you want to play with us and playing with fans in the future, you can also check out the EcksToo Patreon. Anyway, there are two main multiplayer game modes in Star Wars Squadrons alongside the campaign and various training modes, and those are fleet battles and dogfighting. Today, I want to look at how AI players impact both of these game modes. Let's start off with dogfighting. There is no AI in dogfight. It's 5-on-5. There are no capital ships, at least in the maps that we saw. There are no friendly starfighters, so don't expect the AI to impact the battle at all. That was easy. But what about fleet battles? This is the mode where AI are very prominent and, in fact, where they can actually play a part in turning the tide of battle. This video is going to focus on AI Starfighters specifically. I've actually done videos in the past detailing how capital ships behave in Star Wars Squadrons. Basically, the frigate and the cruiser will move towards the enemy slowly over the course of the battle. They don't move laterally a whole lot, at least in the map that I played, Nadiri Shipyards, but they are very effective at screening against enemy fighters. Again, I've done a whole video on tactics and how capital ships work, so I'm not going to reiterate this point. There is, of course, a bit more detail when it comes to the corvettes, and that's the first real bit of how the AI can impact the battle, because corvettes will actually join you in attacking enemy frigates and even their cruiser. So it's actually not a bad idea to consider what your corvette is doing, and your corvette for the Alliance is a CR-90, for the Empire it's a Raider class, because that ship can help provide some cover, it can help thin out enemy starfighters, and it can even damage the enemy capital ships. However, there's a second category of AI on the battlefield, and that of course is AI-controlled starfighters. So people have a lot of questions about how this works, so let me get a few of the common ones out of the way. The first one is how many AI starfighters are on the battlefield at any specific time, and I think this will probably depend on the map. However, when we asked Ian this question, he said they don't have a specific number nailed down, but that each side would most likely have several dozen AI starfighters. I have a lot more questions associated with this. I'd never noticed where AI starfighters spawned from. Do they come from your capital ships or from your back line like player starfighters? Will there be different variants or starship types among the AI? When I played, I'm pretty sure all of the Imperial AIs were TIE fighters and all of the New Republic ships were X-Wings, but there may have also been Interceptor classes. Then my final question would have been, does the AI behavior change depending on the map? Because some maps are very, very different. I'm wondering whether the AI will basically do the same thing every time. Those are my questions, just ones that I couldn't answer based on my playtime. Here's what I do know. AI starfighters play a surprisingly important role in the game. They can absolutely shoot you down. If you're flying through the center of the map and not paying attention, you can get buzzed or even destroyed by an AI. Now, they're not nearly as effective as human players. They won't chase you down across the map, but they will take pot shots and they can kill you, I imagine, especially if you're just sitting there not moving, and so can their enemy corvette or frigate. From that standpoint, AI starfighters can actually really help with map control, and I think that's something that the Squadrons team could use quite intelligently to help protect against certain areas of the map becoming too popular. I mean, they could literally look at the heat maps for where players tend to congregate, and if there's somewhere they shouldn't be, like a certain part of the map, they could add more aggressive AI at that place, or have it so the corvette makes more frequent runs through there. It's just a sort of organic way to keep things flowing. Unfortunately, I'm really not sure whether that level of behavior is in the game. It's sort of hard to tell exactly how an AI is working when you're just playing. What I did notice, however, is that they did typically stay in the center of the map, and they didn't really join in very often on attacking enemy capital ships. Perhaps at all. They mostly just stayed and fought with each other or with other player-controlled starfighters in the area. Now, maybe that's a good thing, but especially when it comes down to attacking the enemy cruiser, I wouldn't mind seeing AIs making runs at the ship. You know, don't make them as effective as players. Maybe that's a good example of why they're not bombers or support vessels. But if anything, it adds quite a bit to the atmosphere, which I think is interesting. I think Battlefront 2 had a sort of interesting idea with this, where in Starfighter Assault, AI starfighters would come in to help with objectives. It did a good job of making almost emergent gameplay and breaking up what in that game ended up being quite monotonous gameplay at times. And it also just helps give the battle a cinematic feeling. When you see starfighters fly in formation, it just looks cool. It makes you feel like you're in a proper battle, not with just 5 people with their heads cut off running around on each side. But the Battlefront 2 comparison is apt for another reason. AI starfighters play a very important role in changing the tides of battle. For those who don't know, Star Wars Fleet Battles has a system that dictates how the flow of fleet battles is going. Basically, the more points you accumulate, the more the battle shifts towards, at first, the enemy's frigates, and then finally their main cruiser. I don't know exactly how things work, but it seems like when the enemy is being pushed back, their frigates are a little less able to defend themselves. There may even be some slight differences to how spawning works, but basically, it's your chance to go on the offense. I'm telling you all this because you can accumulate points to do this shift, not only by killing enemy player-controlled starfighters, but also by killing enemy AI. Of course, you don't get nearly as many points for killing a computer-controlled starfighter. I think it's like 6 times more for a player ship or something, and I do believe if you kill a bunch of AI starfighters in a row, there's sort of diminishing returns. So just as a made-up example, you'll get 4 for the first kill, then maybe 2 for the second kill, and then 1 for all subsequent kills. Whereas you'd get 15 or 10 for killing a player, if that makes sense. So certain players can definitely use this to their advantage, and I almost likened the game mode to a MOBA. This is especially the case with Nadiri Shipyards, which has 3 sort of clear lanes and then almost like a jungle in the middle, and where the AI starfighters mostly congregate in the middle, you can sort of go into this jungle to farm points, turning the tide of battle. When I played as a support ship, I found this really useful. If I wasn't healing my team or deploying smart turrets or whatever else, I would change my target designator to look specifically for enemy AI controlled fighters, and you can actually do that. You can have it so your heads up display only shows friendly fighters, friendly AI fighters, enemy player fighters only, enemy AI fighters only, missiles only, and a whole bunch of other things. So if your team is on the offensive and you're back providing support, in your downtime you can go kill enemy AI fighters to sort of help keep the push alive, which I think is a really interesting strategy. Now, that obviously does leave you vulnerable, and you can't exploit this system because the points, I think, are pretty closely monitored and balanced, but it is certainly another option, and one which helps distinguish fleet battles from simple dogfights. Generally though, I think while the AI is interesting and I like how they impact the overall battle, they are, kind of dumb. Now, I don't want to get this wrong, it's been a while since the interview and I wasn't allowed to record it, but I believe AI behavior was one of the only aspects that Squadron takes from Star Wars Battlefront 2. I'll try to find some confirmation on this point, but you're not fighting human players here. These starfighters are not going to be pulling off any ridiculous maneuvers. They aren't quite just window dressing, they're more than that, but I'm also not sure if they're used to their full potential. In the full Squadrons release, I would really like to see AI starfighters intelligently joining in on attack runs. I'd like to see some emergent events. It'd be really cool if there were just like 5 or 6 different types of AI behavior that would sort of impact the match more than most others. Maybe you have a flight of X-Wings coming in to defend and you have to protect them. Maybe occasionally your team spawns an AI support ship, which if you lose will give the enemy team a big points boost, but which will support you with turrets and repairs if present. Then you could add things like bombing runs. Maybe you could have fighters escorting some of the corvettes or other lighter capital ships. I don't know, there are a lot of options and I just want to see something interesting come release. Either way, I think people will be happy with the amount of AI Starfighters, but I'd like to see them spread a bit more evenly across the map, not just in the middle, and that is how they seem to be, at least in the Nadiri Shipyards map. All in all though, to be honest, when I heard that there were AI Starfighters in fleet battles, I wasn't really that excited. I thought it might be better with just players, so I'm definitely happy after playing that they're in there. I do think they add something, but they could probably, with just a little bit of tweaking, add even more. That, however, is all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed this EcksToo video. Let me know if there's any Squadron stuff you'd like to see in the future before release and before any major news, and I'll be happy to get to it. Thanks for all the support, guys. As always, you can support us by subscribing, liking the video, and if you really want to, donating on the EcksToo Patreon. Until next time, though, guys, this has been Eckhartsladder. Please be safe, and may the Force be with you.